Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They thought the mountain was abandoned, a quiet ridge forgotten by its owner, ripe for the taking. But when a ruthless HOA tried to steal one man's wilderness sanctuary, they sparked a war they never saw coming. This isn't just a land dispute, it's a siege. And the mountain fights back. They say solitude changes a man. I wouldn't know about that. I've always preferred it that way. After 20 years of VC meetings, code reviews, and empty lunchboxes and glass offices, I built something that finally felt like mine. A hand-built cabin perched high in the San Juan Mountains on a piece of Colorado wilderness that I bought. Outright, 180 acres of forest, ridgelines, and silence. No HOA newsletters, no noise complaints, no passive-aggressive meetings about fence colors. I called it The Ridge, but legally, it was just Parcel 742C. To me, though, it was the place where I could feel my lungs again. The cabin was off-grid, solar-powered, fully insulated, and fed by a self-dug well that hadn't frozen once in 5 winters. I'd put everything into it. Every joist, every bolt, every foot of conduit I ran under the floorboards while cursing at the altitude. It wasn't luxury. Hell, no plumbing in the bathroom, just a compost toilet and a shower rig, but it was mine. I visited once a month, usually for hunting, or to split wood and recalibrate the batteries. The rest of the time, it watched the ridgeline alone. 2 months. That's how long I'd been gone this time. A contract came through back in California, some consulting job with a former client who wouldn't take no for an answer, and then a mechanical failure in the Land Cruiser. Between the delays and an early snow, I figured, what's the rush? The ridge wasn't going anywhere. I was dead wrong. It started with a ping from my security system. I was drinking coffee at home, scrolling through emails about AI patent disputes, when my satellite uplink chirped. Motion detected at the ridge. Multiple zones. The feed stuttered. Static. Then it cut out. That had never happened. Not in 5 years. I tried to remote into the storage array. No signal. Pinged the uplink again. Offline. That's when my gut twisted. I knew the tech. I built the system. Someone didn't just walk in front of a camera. Someone shut it down. By noon, I'd thrown a bag in the back of a rental truck, Chevy, decent tires, and I was hauling ass out of Durango with 3 protein bars, a 9mm Glock in the glove box, and enough caffeine in my blood to skip sleep for 2 days. I took the long road up, Highway 160, to a Forest Service route that led to a turnoff barely anyone knew. My private road was never paved, but I kept it cleared. Except this time, halfway up the slope, I saw brake lights, a goddamn barricade. 2 pickup trucks were parked side by side, nose in, blocking the road. Orange reflective barrels flanked them, along with what looked like a custom-made sign. Aspen Creek HOA Recreational Access Point, members only. You've got to be kidding me. I killed the engine and stepped out, the cold mountain air slapping me in the face. A man in dark tactical gear stepped forward. Not police, not military. Private security with the Aspen Creek HOA logo stitched onto his vest like this was some suburban militia cosplay. Another guy stood behind him, hand on a holstered sidearm. Real enough. Sir, this is a restricted access point, the front one said. HOA property, please turn around. I blinked. This is private land. Not according to our jurisdiction, he replied without missing a beat. This is a recreational zone designated by the Aspen Creek HOA. Entry restricted to residents and their guests. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Buddy, I've owned this land since you were probably taking your SATs. Parcel 742C. I've got the deed framed above the fireplace. You're standing on my road. Sir, we were instructed not to allow access. If you'd like to file a complaint, you can speak with HOA management during business hours. I narrowed my eyes. Who gave that instruction? He hesitated. Director Woods. Oh-ho. There it was. The name. I'd heard of him in passing, a retired logistics officer who took HOA management a little too seriously in the development down the hill. I never paid him much attention. Why would I? His HOA had nothing to do with my land. I turned without another word, heart pounding now. I didn't need a fight. Not here, not yet. Let them think they'd won. Back in the truck, I pulled a U-turn and headed downhill. I was too rattled to think straight, but I knew one thing. I wasn't getting back to the ridge through the front gate, so I called in a favor. In Monroe Springs, I hit up an old outfitter buddy and rented a beat-up Jeep Wrangler with a winch and aggressive tires. Then I waited. 1 a.m., I left the motel and took the fire access road, an old logging trail that looped wide through national forest before cutting back along the ridgeline. No cameras, no signs, no patrol. It took 2 hours and one near rollover, but I made it. When I crested the final ridge and saw the cabin, my stomach sank. Floodlights were strung up on my porch. A campfire burned out front. There were at least a dozen tents scattered across my clearing. Families, couples, some guy cooking chili over my split firewood. My front door was open. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker propped in my windowsill. They were treating my sanctuary like a goddamn summer camp. I didn't move. I just sat there in the dark, engine off, hands on the wheel, letting the rage simmer beneath my ribs like a second heartbeat. They thought I was gone. They thought this place was abandoned. They were about to find out just how wrong they were. I didn't sleep that night, just sat in the dark Jeep, parked under a stand of ponderosa pines a few hundred yards above the cabin, watching them. Binoculars in one hand, Glock in the other. I wasn't paranoid, I was prepared. The kind of prepared you get after a lifetime in Silicon Valley watching good people get eaten alive by boardroom hyenas. Those bastards wore suits. These wore hiking boots and Patagonia fleeces. Same smell. By 4 a.m., most of the camp was quiet, except for one guy still snoring on my porch swing. I waited another hour, then drove the Jeep off-trail around the east side of the ridge, hidden behind a bluff. Hiked the last quarter mile in silence, navigating by memory, heart racing. Every crunch of ice beneath my boots sounded like a gunshot. But no one saw me. These weren't trained invaders, just smug suburbanites playing colonizer. The back door was unlocked. Of course it was. I stepped into my cabin and felt my stomach twist. Mud everywhere. Smell of burnt wood and beer. The table I'd hand-sanded for weeks was covered in hot sauce stains and someone's sad attempt at carving initials. My grandfather's hunting rifle was gone from the mantel. The books, wet, scattered. A child's crayon drawing taped to the refrigerator. Aspen Creek Nature Cabin. There was a marshmallow stuck to my solar control panel. Just fused there, like some sugary badge of occupation. I powered up my laptop, miraculously still there in the gun safe, and pulled footage from the hardwired backup drives. Thank God I built redundancy. Over the next hour, I watched my fury sharpen into something colder. Timestamp. 3 weeks ago. A convoy of HOA trucks rolled up the road. 6 men in uniform stepped out, cut the chain at my gate, and installed a sign that said, HOA Recreation Zone, Aspen Creek Trail Access. They walked straight up to the cabin. The lead guy, short, thick-necked, probably ex-military, gestured at the door, then smashed the lock with a crowbar. 2 others followed him inside. They all laughed. Timestamp. 1 week later. Families arriving, setting up tents. One woman hung fairy lights from my trees. Another tried to turn my shed into a wellness yurt. There was a guy who lit a fire pit less than 6 feet from my propane tank. I had all the footage I needed, and a growing need to see someone in handcuffs. By 8 a.m., I'd radioed the county sheriff's office. Luckily, the signal booster still worked. Told dispatch there was an ongoing illegal occupation of private property, that I had surveillance evidence, and that I was requesting immediate intervention. They promised to send a deputy and, upon hearing the words forcible entry and unauthorized structure use, put me through to a U.S. Marshal out of Silverton. I spent the next hour compiling everything: surveillance stills, GPS coordinates, land surveys, and a high-resolution scan of my deed. I emailed it all to my attorney back in California, CC'd a local firm I found online with property rights litigation in bold on their homepage. At 10:45, I saw the dust trail winding up the road. 2 county vehicles, 1 marked, 1 not. Out stepped a deputy in a brown jacket, and next to him a broad-shouldered man with mirrored sunglasses and a U.S. Marshal Service badge that gleamed like Judgment Day. "Mr. Miller," the marshal said as I approached, "I believe we've got some people who need to be educated." We walked through the meadow together, the deputy recording everything on his body cam. We didn't have to knock. The first camper spotted us and called out, "Is this about the parking permits?" I nearly laughed. Marshal Rivers stepped onto the porch like he owned it, raised his voice, and said, "This property is under federal protection pending investigation into unlawful occupation and destruction of private assets. All non-authorized individuals must evacuate immediately." The response was exactly what you'd expect when you tell 30 HOA residents their luxury weekend getaway is actually a federal crime scene. Some tried to argue. One guy claimed it was communal land. Another woman pulled out a printed email from Director Woods saying the HOA had obtained temporary recreational jurisdiction. I took that copy, scanned it, and forwarded it to my lawyer. The marshal wasn't having it. He pointed at my survey map laid out on the tailgate of his truck, clearly marking Parcel 742C in my name. "Ma'am," he told one particularly mouthy camper, "you're not standing on parkland. You're standing on Mr. Miller's bedroom rug." By early afternoon, the site was cleared. Everyone was told to vacate. Some didn't go quietly. One guy tried to argue that his kids had already bonded with the wildlife. The deputy threatened trespassing charges. That helped. I stood near the fire pit and watched them file out like ants fleeing a kicked-over hill. Tents in arms, coolers banging. One guy tried to take the porch swing. I made him put it down. Then I walked inside. My home. Trashed, violated, but mine again. I sat in the corner with my laptop, began uploading footage to a secure cloud server, and titled the folder Aspen Creek Invasion Phase 1. This was far from over, but now I had names, faces, timestamps, and the law on my side. Let them come. 2 days after the eviction, I was back in town, sitting across from a sharp-jawed lawyer named Marcus Lowell, who looked like the kind of guy that sued oil companies for sport. His office was in a glass and brick building off Main Street in Silverton, with enough degrees on the wall to make Harvard blush. I handed him a hard drive, a folder of survey maps, and a USB stick labeled Marshmallow Occupation Full Cut. He plugged it all in and watched in silence. HOA security breaking locks, campers dragging coolers, children drawing murals on my front door. When the video ended, he leaned back and said, "You've got them by the balls. Now let's make them feel it." We filed an emergency injunction to freeze any claim of recreational access on Parcel 742C. The county clerk processed it in under an hour. That's when Marcus asked, "Did you know they filed for administrative reassignment of your land?" I stared at him. "Come again?" He turned his monitor toward me. On the screen, a scanned document stamped 3 weeks prior. Aspen Creek HOA had filed a formal application for community use reclassification through a state-level program I'd never even heard of, Public Servitude Initiative Section 7.14b. The kind of bureaucratic weapon designed for reclaiming genuinely abandoned lots, flood zones, old mining claims. Not a fully functional deeded lived-in cabin with working Wi-Fi. They were trying to steal my land on paper. We traced the application to the county zoning office. Guess who signed the initial review? A guy named Robert Lakewood, board member of the County Development Commission and, drumroll, golfing buddy of HOA President Alden Woods. It clicked into place like a loaded chamber. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a slow-moving heist. Alden Woods. I hadn't met him yet, but the name carried weight in Monroe Springs like a storm warning. Retired Army logistics officer, ran the Aspen Creek HOA like a forward operating base. Everyone called him the Colonel, even though he was technically just a civilian now. Man loved order, probably labeled his cereal. Turns out 3 months ago, he'd pitched a plan to revitalize underused Highland property in front of the Aspen Creek Board, claimed it would create low-impact recreational zones for HOA members, funded by increased dues and private donors. He even produced mock-up maps that included my cabin as a Phase 1 lodge site. That's when I realized he knew it was my land. They all did. And they were gambling that if I didn't show up, if the place looked abandoned long enough, they could bulldoze paperwork through the back channels and claim it under the radar. Too bad I came back. Marcus brought in backup, Jane Rivers, a former district prosecutor who left government because she wanted to shoot back legally. Now she specialized in property defense and was grinning like a wolf. She took one look at the HOA's claim and said, "This smells like backroom sweat and bourbon. Let's burn it down." While the legal team started tearing into the county's servitude petition, I went back to the ridge to secure the place properly. Reinforced the gate, welded new hinges, installed infrared tripwires and a live-streaming drone system I'd built as a hobby years ago. If anyone so much as blinked at my pine cones, I'd see it in 4K. I also reached out to Sarah Chen, a journalist from the Durango Daily Sun who'd once covered a corporate land grab in Telluride. I sent her a tip, a few clips from the security footage, and one line. "Ever seen a homeowner association commit land fraud?" She called me the same night. Next morning, she showed up at the Ridge with a thermal coat, camera, and enough curiosity to fuel a congressional hearing. We sat by the fire pit, drinking canned coffee while I told her everything, start to finish. She took notes. Then asked if I had any documentation. I gave her all of it. Maps, deeds, footage, the HOA filing, photos of my cabin trashed, the crayon sign on the fridge, the video where one HOA member actually pisses into my woodpile. She didn't flinch. "We're going to make them famous," she said. By the end of the week, her expose went live under the headline, "The HOA That Tried to Steal a Mountain." It spread fast. Reddit, Twitter, YouTube. Even a link on Nextdoor titled, "This is Why We Hate HOAs." 600,000 views in 48 hours. Aspen Creek tried to release a statement calling the situation a misunderstanding involving communal intent, but nobody was buying it. People weren't dumb. They saw a bunch of HOA suits trying to turn private wilderness into their personal playground and getting caught red-handed. That's when the threat started. Someone posted my home address in California online. I got 3 anonymous emails telling me to back off and accept a settlement. One of them attached a blurry night shot of my cabin with a red circle drawn over the window. I forwarded all of it to Marcus, then went back to the Ridge with a loaded shotgun and 3 GoPros strapped to trees. They thought I'd give up now. The county building looked like any other small-town civic center. Flag out front, cracked concrete steps, doors that didn't quite close flush. But inside, it reeked of the kind of quiet power that crushes people in triplicate forms and unanswered. Emails. Marcus and I were seated outside the zoning board chamber, waiting for the closed-door review to end. My emergency appeal to revoke the HOA's servitude petition was under consideration, which was bureaucrat for, "We're stalling while our buddies scramble." "Let me do the talking," Marcus said. "I wasn't planning to flip a table," I replied. He looked at me. "Don't. That's what they want." Inside the chamber, 5 county officials sat in a semicircle behind a long desk. At the center, Chairman Dale Bake, a former real estate developer with a neck wider than his head. To his left, Robert Lakewood, the HOA's golden boy. And next to him, Janine Walters, who hadn't said a word in any public meetings, but whose husband worked for the Aspen Creek Architectural Committee. A rigged table, start to finish. Marcus presented our case. Property deed, security footage, records of active use, confirmation that the parcel had never been listed as tax delinquent or abandoned. Everything was by the book. Then Lakewood piped up, asking whether the footage had been manipulated, implying I'd staged a federal officer's involvement just to block the HOA. Marcus stared at him like he'd asked if gravity was optional. "Are you suggesting my client fabricated a visit from a U.S. Marshal, which is verifiably logged with dispatch and backed by both federal and local records?" Lakewood backed off, but the tone was set. They delayed the vote, claimed they needed further review, claimed some of the land markings were ambiguous, claimed there was precedent for shifting land into community access if the private owner hadn't made visible investment. Marcus was furious. So was I. This wasn't ignorance. It was a stall tactic, meant to give Aspen Creek time to cover their tracks or grease more palms. The moment we left the meeting, he was already drafting an injunction against the county for administrative abuse. Meanwhile, Jane Rivers sent an official ethics complaint to the state's Department of Internal Oversight, naming Lakewood and Walters for conflict of interest and abuse of process. But I wasn't done yet. That night, I called Sarah Chen and gave her the green light for part 2 of the expose. This time, we named names. The Men Behind the Mountain, how Aspen Creek's HOA used political ties to seize private land, went live the next day. We included public records, voting logs, board meeting footage, LinkedIn screenshots, even HOA minutes that casually referred to my cabin as a future public resource. The internet did what the internet does. It torched them. Lakewood's Yelp business page was flooded. Walter's husband got asked why his wife was trying to communize Colorado. Someone turned Alden Woods into a meme, General HOA, complete with fake medals shaped like noise complaints. But not everyone was laughing. That night, my email got hit with a phishing attack. Then the drone feed from my cabin glitched. One of the cameras was physically knocked out. I checked the timestamp, 3:36 a.m. Someone had been there. Next morning, I found fresh boot prints outside the cabin. I didn't call the cops. I called Ray Diaz, a former Army recon vet I knew from a side project years ago, Tactical training simulations for drone defense. Ray didn't ask questions. He just said, "I'll bring 2 guys. We'll rotate shifts. Just feed us and don't shoot us by mistake." That afternoon, he showed up with Leo and Deeks, both ex-Special Forces. Both looked like they could bench press my Jeep. They set up trail cams, pressure sensors, and infrared tripwires with alarming speed. They even installed low-light sonic alarms. Barely audible, but enough to wake me if anyone came within 50 yards of the ridge. That night, I slept for the first time in 4 days. But while I locked down the ridge, HOA doubled down on the media spin. They rolled out a press conference with Alden Woods front and center, stoic in a blazer, arms crossed like he was reviewing a troop formation. He called the situation deeply regrettable and insisted Aspen Creek had acted within its understanding of local land availability. He didn't mention the break-in, or the barricade, or the families squatting in my living room. Worse, they floated an offer. A formal letter arrived via courier, $5,000 to amicably transfer access rights to designated portions of Parcel 742C for community recreation. I stared at it for a long time, then laughed until my ribs hurt. $5,000. That was what they thought my land was worth. I called their lawyer directly. "This is Grant Miller," I said. "Tell Alden Woods to shove his $5,000 up, whichever HOA bylaw gives him the right." Then I hung up. The next morning, I found a yellow sticky note on my truck windshield. "You should have taken the deal." Ray found a tire slash on the Wrangler. Leo spotted a shadow in the woods that didn't match any heat signature they knew. Things were shifting. This wasn't just legal now. This was personal, and I had no plans to flinch. By now, I kept a shotgun leaned against the wall next to the coffee pot. Not because I was scared. I was done being scared. I just liked seeing it there. A reminder, this wasn't a negotiation anymore. This was siege warfare with spreadsheets. Ray and the guys turned the ridge into a fortress over the next 3 days. We added 2 more cameras, motion-triggered floodlights, and a full perimeter of tripwire alarms that made the forest look like a sci-fi set. I wasn't just defending property, I was defending precedent. If these people got away with this, what stopped them from claiming the next cabin, the next lot, the next 1,000 acres? Alden Woods didn't come in person. Of course not. Cowards with power never do. But his HOA kept circling, figuratively and literally. We spotted a drone hovering over the tree line. Ray jammed its signal. 2 SUV loads of hikers parked just outside the marked private road and started taking pictures of the gate. Leo walked out with a scoped rifle over his shoulder. They left quickly. Then came the offer number 2, this time by certified mail. $15,000 and a waiver of any civil claim in exchange for shared recreational rights. Shared. As if I'd build a picnic area for the same people who tore down my locks and let their kids carve stick figures into my walls. I called Marcus. Should I wipe with it or frame it? He said, "Frame it. Judges love exhibits." Then came the breach. It happened at 2:38 in the morning. We caught them on thermal first. 10 figures, hooded, flashlights taped with red cellophane like they were in some kind of budget black ops movie. They cut through the southern fence line, the only stretch we hadn't fully reinforced. They were clumsy, tripped one of the ground sensors. Ray hit the alarm manually, flooding the tree line with strobe lights and a screech that would make a raccoon go sterile. I was out the door in 5 seconds, boots half-laced, shotgun in hand. The invaders scattered. One fell face first into a snowbank and started crying. Another tried to vault the fence and got his jacket caught. Ray tackled one. Leo and Deeks didn't even have to draw weapons. The sound alone was enough. By the time the police arrived, 6 of them were still on the property. 3 were teens, 2 were mid-30s, and 1 was a gray-haired woman in yoga pants who kept shouting that nature belongs to everyone. The deputies cuffed them all. One of the kids was carrying a printed HOA newsletter with Community Expedition Ridge Trail Access scribbled on top in pen. It wasn't even subtle. Alden's fingerprints weren't on it, but his style was. The next morning, the story broke wide. Sarah Chen ran the headline, "Aspen Creek HOA linked to armed trespass incident. Vigilante enforcement backfires." Every outlet from Denver to Seattle picked it up. Twitter went nuclear. Reddit flamed with rage. HOA hell trended for 48 hours. Meanwhile, I filed a formal police report against Alden Woods and the HOA board for conspiracy to commit unlawful entry and incitement of trespassing. Marcus added a civil suit, unauthorized use of private land, material damages, and emotional distress. Then I pulled the big lever. I emailed the full video package, every night cam clip, every frame of the break-in, every shot of Ray and his guys acting with restraint, to a legal channel on YouTube called Land Law Uncensored. Their channel was full of deep dives into property disputes and corrupt zoning boards. The host, a former federal judge turned creator, called me within a day. "This is insane," he said. "We'll feature it." 70-minute special. I said, "Make it count." And they did. The video went viral. It wasn't just HOA critics now. It was survivalists, property rights activists, libertarians, even mainstream legal circles. Suddenly, Parcel 742C became a symbol, not just a place. But Aspen Creek still wasn't backing off. Instead, they sent a new legal rep, smoother, quieter, wearing a $2,000 suit and a smile that said, "Settlement." He showed up at Marcus's office with a revised proposal and an apology for the uncoordinated actions of individual residents. They offered me $25,000 plus full liability coverage for any structural discrepancies their people might have caused. I told Marcus to tell him to shove his structural discrepancies into his escrow account. That night, we installed a final sign at the ridge gate: polished steel, motion lit, private property. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Smile for the camera. Let them read it in the dark. Some battles you win with bullets, others you win with paperwork. This was both. The lawsuit was officially filed in the San Miguel County Court 2 weeks after the break-in. Marcus made sure it hit hard. 3 counts: criminal trespass, property destruction, and unlawful occupation with intent to exploit private land for financial gain. Jane added a request for preliminary injunction to freeze all Aspen Creek HOA activities related to Parcel 742-C. The document read like a war crime indictment with footnotes. Alden Woods finally showed his face. We saw him across the courtroom during the preliminary hearing. Buzz cut, broad shoulders, pressed gray suit that screamed, "Retired colonel turned bureaucratic tyrant." He didn't acknowledge me, didn't flinch when Marcus submitted the drone footage, didn't blink when the judge reviewed photos of my wrecked cabin and the Aspen Creek Nature Retreat signs his board posted at the trailhead. But then the judge leaned forward, adjusting her glasses. "I see no ambiguity here. The defendant had no legal right to occupy or authorize use of Parcel 742C. Pending further litigation, Aspen Creek HOA is ordered to immediately cease all references to this land in any communications, maps, or developments." It wasn't a final ruling, but it was a shot across the bow. That same evening, while I was back at the ridge resecuring one of the back cameras, I got a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. I'm not your enemy." Normally, I'd ignore that, but it came with an attachment, an internal HOA memo timestamped 3 months prior, with a header that made my blood chill. Aspen Creek Phase Expansion, Low Occupancy Adjacent Zones Strategy. My cabin was listed under Test Case A. Suggested acquisition method, paper trail ambiguity, followed by recreational integration and eventual zoning transition. They'd planned it, word for word. This wasn't a rogue operation, it was HOA doctrine. The sender's name was Derek Sloan, a junior board member I vaguely recalled from HOA meeting screenshots. In all the videos, he never spoke, just watched. 20-something, uncomfortable in khakis, clearly out of his depth among retirees with power complexes. We met at a diner off Highway 550 in a back booth. Derek looked like he hadn't slept in a week. "I voted against all of it," he said immediately. "They froze me out after the first month." Alden said it was executive-level business, but I started seeing things, emails, plans, the recreational maps, and then the budget notes, money set aside for land transition facilitation. That's what did it for me. He slid a thumb drive across the table. It's all in there, meeting recordings, internal chat logs, even a Slack message where Lakewood literally says, "If Miller's still MIA in 90 days, we can file for dormancy." I stared at the drive. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because I bought into a nice neighborhood, not a hostile takeover." I didn't trust him completely, but the data was gold. Marcus and Jane nearly high-fived in court when they saw it. We filed an amended motion the next day, attempted zoning fraud through administrative manipulation, complete with direct quotes, timelines, and internal communication. The judge scheduled a full evidentiary hearing. The HOA scrambled. They held an emergency meeting that Sunday. Sarah Chen snuck in a mic. The board was fractured. 3 members wanted to settle immediately. One suggested publicly blaming Alden. Someone actually asked, "Can we pretend the hikers acted independently?" It was too late. The damage was public. Then, the county hit back. Based on Jane's ethics complaints and the new internal leaks, the Colorado Department of Internal Oversight opened an investigation into Chairman Beck, Lakewood, and Walters for abuse of administrative procedure and undeclared conflicts of interest. Lakewood resigned the next morning. Walters followed 2 days later. Sarah published a piece titled HOA Power Games Expose County Corruption in Land Grab Scandal. People didn't just care now. They were furious. National media picked it up. A congressman quoted the story on Twitter. HOA reformers started calling me a poster child. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, but I knew one thing. Alden was cornered, but a cornered man is still dangerous. At the next hearing, Alden didn't blink. He brought in a new legal team, top-tier civil litigators from Denver. Their strategy was clear: drown us in paperwork, delay every motion, bleed us with continuances and appeals. They claimed I had abandoned the property by inconsistent visitation, failed to maintain appropriate signage, and, my personal favorite, knowingly allowed the cabin to present as an open community feature. Marcus rolled his eyes. They're building fog, but fog only delays fire. We pushed forward. Discovery began. Depositions were scheduled. We were building momentum, but the terrain was shifting. Alden wasn't giving up, and I knew the storm hadn't peaked yet. The first time I saw Alden Woods truly rattled, he wasn't yelling. He was silent. It was during the pre-trial deposition. We were in a neutral conference room in Montrose. Neutral table, neutral lighting, neutral coffee. But the tension felt like a tripwire. Alden sat across from Marcus and Jane, surrounded by his Denver lawyers, stiff-backed and stone-faced. I watched from a separate room via video feed, per court order. "Mr. Woods," Marcus said evenly, "did you authorize Aspen Creek HOA security personnel to enter Parcel 742C on August 12th? "I authorized perimeter review," Alden replied, eyes forward. There was reason to believe the land had transitioned to public jurisdiction under Colorado Statute 7414B. "And were you aware the land in question was under active deed, maintained and visited monthly, with installed surveillance and power systems?" A pause. "That information was not fully verified at the time." Marcus nodded slowly, then slid a document across the table. "This is an HOA memo dated July 22nd, referring to Parcel 742C as a primary candidate for low-risk expansion due to lack of recent owner presence. Does that sound like verification to you?" Alden didn't answer. Then Jane leaned forward, calm but sharp. "You served 23 years in military logistics, Mr. Woods. You're a man who values chain of command, operational clarity, and order. How do you reconcile that with authorizing an operation that involved unauthorized entry, unlawful occupation, and a fabricated signage plan?" For a moment, something flickered behind his eyes. Then he said, "You don't understand what disorder looks like. I've seen what happens when no one takes charge. We kept people safe. We gave them structure. That's when I realized this wasn't just about control. It was about trauma. This man didn't just run an HOA. He was recreating a command post, his own little FOB in the mountains. And I'd just burned down his fantasy. Back at the ridge, the cleanup had become ritual. I'd replaced broken floorboards, rehung my rifles, repainted the walls, and even restored the solar panel rack they'd used as a goddamn towel hanger. Ray's team stuck around, now rotating every 72 hours. A few local veterans joined the effort. We weren't a militia. We were a firewall. And we were getting attention. One morning, a black SUV rolled up the access road, unmarked but clean, with tinted windows and federal plates. I stepped out with my hand resting on the shotgun. The driver got out, held up ID. U.S. Department of the Interior. "We're here to assess active misuse of federal legal instruments under Section 9C. Apparently, Sarah's articles and our court filings had triggered an audit of the Public Servitude Initiative, the very program Alden tried to hijack. Turns out, several other HOAs had attempted similar land reclassifications, citing abandonment, vague mapping, or ambiguous signage, just like mine. My case had become precedent. A week later, the audit was made public. 2 state officials were suspended. A temporary moratorium was placed on all pending community land use claims statewide. I opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for years. That same night, Ray intercepted chatter on a local forum, a private Aspen Creek message board. Someone had leaked part of the internal investigation. The HOA was imploding. 2 board members resigned in protest. One submitted an affidavit to the court admitting they were pressured into silence about the illegal occupation. Derek reached out again. He looked calmer this time, sharper. "They're eating each other alive," he said. "There's talk of removing Alden completely." "Voluntarily?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not exactly." A week before the trial, the HOA held an emergency vote. Sarah got audio. "Chairman, we cannot proceed with Woods as director. His actions have compromised the reputation and legality of this organization." Alden refused to step down, said it was a matter of principle. That was his mistake. The board expelled him by majority vote, effective immediately. The next day, Alden showed up on my property. No security, no press, just him. On foot, walking up the ridge trail like some post-apocalyptic priest. I met him halfway. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the cabin. The fire pit, the repaired solar rack, the cameras. "This place was empty," he said finally, "for months. No one watched it. No one cared. I didn't blink. I cared." He nodded. "Well, it's yours again." "Congratulations, I waited. Nothing more." He turned, walked back into the trees, and disappeared. I stood there a while listening to the wind. He didn't apologize, he didn't grovel, but he left. And I knew something had just ended. The courtroom was packed. Locals, journalists, 2 HOA members who testified against Alden, a YouTuber in a hoodie whispering into a mic. Even Derek was there, sitting in the back row, hands clasped like he was watching a funeral. Judge Howard leaned forward on the bench, her expression the same neutral wall she'd maintained for 3 weeks. But her words weren't neutral. "Based on the overwhelming evidence presented," she said, "including but not limited to verified video surveillance, digital correspondence between HOA board members, the testimony of multiple residents, and the physical damage documented by law, enforcement, and private contractors, this court finds the Aspen Creek Homeowners Association liable for unlawful occupation, destruction of property, and attempted coercion of legal ownership through administrative manipulation." She paused. Silence. No one dared breathe. "In accordance with state and federal law, the HOA is ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $1,500,000 to Mr. Grant Miller and to issue a formal written and public apology acknowledging their unlawful actions. Furthermore, all applications submitted by the HOA regarding Parcel 742-C are nullified and permanently barred from resubmission under any pretext. This includes any future development attempts under renamed entities or merged associations." I didn't smile. I didn't even move. Just sat there, letting it soak in like sun on bare skin after a long winter. Alden wasn't present. His lawyers were. They didn't say a word. After the ruling, I walked out without speaking to anyone down the courthouse steps past the waiting cameras. I didn't stop until I reached my truck. I opened the door, paused, and looked up at the mountains. The ridge had waited. Now it was mine again, fully, legally, irrevocably. 2 weeks later, we installed a new gate, steel reinforced, biometrics, the kind you'd use at a military compound. Ray and Leo helped weld it. I paid them double, not because they asked, just because it felt right. At the center of the gate, bolted into a block of Colorado granite, was a custom bronze plaque. Private property. Approach. Hawks. Prosecution established 2017. Still standing trespassers make great content. Tourists laughed when they saw it. Locals took selfies. I didn't care. It wasn't for them. It was for me. I turned the old barricade site, the place where they'd first put up that ridiculous Aspen Creek recreational access sign, into a fire pit. Built a circle of stones, added benches, set a cast iron kettle above it. On the largest boulder nearby, I carved 2 words, "Folly Eternal," a reminder. That fall, I invited friends up, old engineering buddies, a few of Ray's crew, Sarah, even Derek. We drank bourbon, grilled elk, and watched the sunset over the tree line. Someone brought a guitar. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch when a branch snapped in the woods. My cabin is still mine, not because a judge said so, but because I fought, because I showed up. And if there's one thing people like Alden Woods can never understand, it's this. Sometimes the mountain fights back.